The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Welcome to the Amber Mac Show. Coming up, how we can get to a better digital future for Canada, what's wrong with Meta's AI plans in WhatsApp, what happens when you spy on people at work, and we talk to a documentary filmmaker about the impact of artificial intelligence. Hey, Jeff.
Hey, Amber. I'm super looking forward to your interview with Philip Shane. He was an awesome friend to our video podcast Command N back in the day when he was creating the Being Elmo documentary. But it's also a huge week in Canada on the political front, so I'm excited to be talking about that a little later as well. But first, let's get to the news.
News Matters.
We're going to start off our news this week with what seems like a blast from the past. Yahoo wants to buy Google's browser.
Yeah, this is old school. Yahoo has been building its own web browser prototype for a little while now, but now it's eyeing buying Google's Chrome browser because of the Department of Justice antitrust suit against Google, which may force them to sell Google Chrome. So I think part of Yahoo's interest in this is they now have about a 3% market share for search. I'm actually surprised it's that high, but they were saying that given how many people conduct their web searches from directly in the browser address line, that Yahoo sees a major opportunity to expand their reach by having that kind of a way to have their search be put right in front of the users in the place they're most likely to use it.
And I think we know from reading some of the headlines that Yahoo isn't the only one who is eyeing up Chrome, which it could be newly single and ready to mingle, if we can use that in the tech terms. Perplexity and OpenAI have both expressed interest in buying Chrome recently as well. Perplexity's CEO, who I have to say is a great follow on social media, he recently explained that his company's interest in building its own browser is to collect data on what its users do outside of the Perplexity app in order to sell hyper-personalized targeted ads. Beyond that, we should also mention Perplexity has announced a partnership with Motorola, which is a name I don't hear a lot about in the consumer tech world, to pre-install Perplexity on Razr series phones, which can be accessed through Moto AI. So, Jeff, this is really interesting because to me, Perplexity seems like a real leader in terms of an amazing experience if you are looking for a chatbot kind of beyond ChatGPT. And then Motorola is a company we haven't heard a lot about. To see them joining together could be interesting.
Yeah, and even just the angle on Perplexity wanting this so they can sell ads kind of shows you that the monetization system for online has not changed very much in a while. And speaking of that, and speaking of companies involved in antitrust suits, Meta's WhatsApp is feeling some heat over its new optional AI tool. And what seems to be the problem with the optional part of that, Amber?
Well, I've been following this story pretty closely. So basically, in WhatsApp, there is now a new Meta AI feature. It's not yet available for everyone, but the idea is that it kind of lives in there within WhatsApp. It's been really difficult to actually turn that off. And in fact, I think because of public pressure, Meta has announced that, hey, we are going to allow people to essentially remove that from WhatsApp if they don't want Meta AI in there. Now, I do want to say as well, Jeff, that they're not the only social media company to try this. A couple of years ago, Snapchat actually built a tool or feature inside their app called My AI that sat at the top of your contacts list. They got in so much trouble for this because it was impossible to remove unless you actually paid for it, that they ended up making it optional. So you would think that Meta would approach this with a little bit more sensibility, especially when people are, I think, quite aware about the issue of having an AI sifting through what are or supposed to be private encrypted messages.
Absolutely. And like Meta says, gives in direction relative to that exact thing. Don't share information, including sensitive topics about others or yourself that you don't want the AI to retain and use. I mean, I would think most of us don't want the AI to retain and use much of anything. But yeah, it's they started off like, oh, it's entirely optional, and then it didn't seem to have any way you can remove it. So I think our listeners can at least take heart in if you kick up a big enough fuss, you might actually get what these guys promise you. And we should note that some users won't have seen this AI tool yet because it hasn't been rolled out to all countries. It's still being tested. back in the United States and other AI news, it looks like Trump has signed an executive order to encourage AI education in K to 12 schools in the United States.
There is just a little bit of information about this as far as what this means. So, this is the creation of a new AI task force and grant programs to help expand the use of AI in schools, which I think, Jeff, at first glance seems like a good thing. This includes not just administration and evaluation, but also bringing AI courses and other impacts to the curriculum. But this also makes me a little bit nervous in terms of the lack of details.
I have to say too, it'd be nice to think of it as progress, but the K to 12 system in the United States is even worse than it is here in Canada. And if history is any indicator, then the priority here is probably more about disempowering teachers than helping students. So I'm a little skeptical about what their goal is with this, and I'm also just skeptical about whether after years of trying to keep kids off tablets and stuff like that, that we should be putting kindergartens in front of AI computers to teach them. So we'll have to see, as you say, not many details yet, but I think that's one to keep an eye on.
It sure is. Now, sticking with some US news and the Trump administration, they have announced that they want to speed up the use of self driving vehicles. I wonder who influenced them on that. It's really hard to say. And this includes weakening some safety requirements and relaxing rules around reporting safety incidents. Who could this possibly favor, Jeff?
Yeah, it pretty much spells out Elon Musk pretty hard. Now, there are a couple things in here that make some sense. So, if you've got cars without steering wheels for human drivers to use, then this says that you don't have to have rear view mirrors. I guess that makes sense for sure. But the US group Advocates for Highway and Auto Safety commented that it's disappointing that the Department of Transportation, quote, chose to dilute instead of enhance the reporting requirements. So that is what has me more worried, like in an age where we should have pretty radical transparency about this stuff, especially when you're getting into a product that could take your life from you. I think it's really important that we know what's going on. So yeah, the main thing that makes me hopeful about self-driving cars is that it'd be hard for them to be much worse than human drivers these days.
I think you make a fair point. I think autonomous vehicles make a lot of sense in certain scenarios, but certainly we continue to need regulation around that. So this is one of those stories that, again, it just feels a bit like a red flag. In other unsettling news, the company Work Composer, I didn't really know anything about them, but it turns out they capture screenshots of employees' computers every 3 to 5 minutes, and they actually work with more than 200,000 companies worldwide. And I actually know someone who was telling me at their workplace that there is software that does this on their computer.
Yeah.
This is just unbelievable.
Yeah. What's especially unbelievable is that that company inadvertently leaked over 21 million screenshots online. And the way they did this is that they put them on an unsecured Amazon S3 bucket. So this company that makes Work Composer and is monitoring employees for over 200,000 companies worldwide can't seem to be bothered to do much about security if they're storing these on that kind of storage without the security. And I just don't know how companies can feel comfortable about that, whatever they're getting out of monitoring their employees. So it's so much better to be able to trust somebody to do the right thing than to keep your eye on them all the time. So yeah, that's totally agree with you there. And why don't we switch to a happier note? A little bit of nostalgia. YouTube just turned 20 years old on April 23rd.
Incredible. Now, I'm not one to toot my own horn because I think we get tired of listening to people who were like, I was first, I did that. But I do believe that on Call for Help G4 Tech TV, I was the first person to review YouTube on broadcast television. And that video still exists out there on YouTube. Normally, I would want to share this, but I looked so young that I feel like you'll see the age gap very quickly. So you can go find that by yourselves. It is hard to believe that it has been so long. And I had a chance to read more about one of the first videos, which was from a YouTube co-founder who posted a 90-second video called "Me at the Zoo," and it was a very innocent video, and I think
Yeah.
that was kind of an innocent time in YouTube's history.
Yeah, it's incredible to see how it's evolved. We were there early with Command N and stuff like that. And at that time, it didn't really seem like it could be an indoctrination tool to train terrorists and or a way to, all the unsafe kid stuff on there and all that. So it's gone the way of a lot of our technological dreams, in that it's become a little bit nightmarish in parts, but still, YouTube's really the only social media network that almost everybody is on at some point. And it's just impressive what they've done to date, for sure.
Yeah, it really is. And they have fairly good moderation tools in terms of taking some of that content down. So we got to respect the people who are continuing to do that. Next up in the other Mac, Jeff paints us a picture of the digital future he'd like to see under Canada's newly elected government.
The Other Mac.
Canada just had our 45th election, and since I'm recording this on the weekend, I don't even know who won. But regardless, here is my advice for digital priorities for a better Canada. I'm going to focus on 3 things that will not only make Canadians' lives better, but that'll also make us more productive and more competitive, 2 things our country dearly needs to succeed. My top priority is for the majority of Canadians to be able to file taxes online without the use of an accountant. In Estonia, you can do this in 5 minutes. The CRA already has the information it needs to file taxes on behalf of most Canadians, and the goal here would be to receive an email with CRA's estimate of what you owe, a link to how they calculated it, and another link to provide information to request a reassessment if necessary. And what most people don't really realize about this, and why it's so important, is that many of the benefits that politicians announce for poorer Canadians simply never reach those people if they don't file their taxes. So this measure can help the poor more than anyone. Next up for me is national healthcare records. Yes, I get healthcare is a provincial responsibility, so someone please tell federal politicians and voters that. But the fact remains that healthcare is not infrequently delivered outside of one's home province, and the federal government coming up with a system that could serve all Canadians would be far better than waiting for 10 provinces to get up to speed, and probably safer too, and we'll talk about that in the next point. Third is to be able to vote online. This election cost taxpayers about $600 million and employed 250,000 workers, so that each of us could put a single check marks in a single box. And that doesn't even consider lost work time for going to the polls or other related costs, including environmental costs if you're doing calculations like that. So what is our national reluctance in 2025 about doing these things? Well, one of my favorite sayings I've heard about Canada during my years working in international development was that the Canadian bureaucracy is so risk-averse that if they were a hockey team, they'd put 6 goaltenders on the ice. Well, we can no longer afford that luxury, and anyone who's suffered through the now nearly $4 billion Phoenix pay system fiasco has seen how the combination of risk aversion and a deep lack of accountability is a recipe for disaster in complex systems like these. And while it may not be comforting, we also need to get over the fear of online attacks. Between social media oversharing by most people and the regular hacks we see of banks, hospitals, and the like, that ship has sailed. If that's an unsurmountable concern for you, then maybe we just need to do a better job at it, which takes me to my final point. While our modern political culture has been deeply invested in training us that words matter more than actions, that's just not true. So if you want to claim that Canada is the greatest country in the world and nothing is beyond us, then let's actually do the hard work of proving that, because we've been doing a terrible job of it for a while now. Will some accountants lose their jobs with online tax filing? Yes, of course they will. Will some people have their medical data compromised? Yes, and that's already happening. But will Canadians be happier and more productive? Yes, they will be, and the risk is worth it. Canadians need to start pairing their strong words in support of Canadian independence with a tolerance for risk and an insistence on change that Canada cannot succeed without. So let's do what's right, make sure our citizens are digitally literate. Let's make sure All of these systems are completely audible and transparent so that citizens will always know whenever anyone anywhere uses their data. But most importantly, let's make sure that we're willing to match our words to our actions, hold our politicians and bureaucrats to account, and stop pretending it won't be hard. We're Canadian. We can do this. Let's prove it. I'm the other Mac.
The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Philip Shane is an award-winning documentary filmmaker with over 35 years' experience working on documentaries from Elmo to Einstein. He's currently producing and directing a feature documentary called The World I Want to Live In about Myst, one of the most important video games of all time. He also teaches classes on AI for documentary filmmakers, and Amber spoke with Philip about his documentary work and AI training. Here's their conversation.
AI Spotlight.
Philip, thank you so much for joining me today. Really excited for this conversation.
Me too. Me too. It's great to talk to you.
We have known each other for many, many years. You were definitely one of the original, I want to say, influencers online, in the sense that you embraced social media in such an incredible way, but you were also obviously working in documentary filmmaking. So maybe we can go back before we talk about what you're doing today and talk about the early days of the internet and your filmmaking work.
Oh my God, I would love to. I'd love to, yes.
So let's start, if we can, just because when we met, you were working on a documentary called Being Elmo.
Yeah, that is amazing, actually. And I remember the thing I was most excited to talk to you about was, one, I was a huge fan of Command N, so it was amazing to get to see you in person. We were up in Toronto for the Hot Docs Film Festival, which was an amazing experience. And the thing I was most excited about technologically, was that, we had me and my colleague Justin Weinstein, who was also edited with me, we worked out of our own homes. Imagine that. And, it was all done remotely. And the producer and director of the film, Connie Marks, was in her apartment in a different part of the city. And I think right around that time, the internet was just about able to accept large video files. And even then, I don't think we were doing much. We definitely weren't doing much streaming, not a lot of live stuff. I mean, I guess, YouTube had been around for a number of years at that point. But the idea of editing remotely was still a pretty new experience. And then the pandemic hit, and now it's like everything's like that.
When you look at your experience as a documentary filmmaker over the past few decades, how have things changed because of new technologies?
Oh, man. Well, it's funny because the release of AI, let's say back in November 2023 is when ChatGPT kind of blew up, gave me a feeling of deja vu going back to the early 90s when digital editing came around, So I remember I had experience in computers before I switched into film when I was younger. And when I switched into film in the early 80s, mid 80s, I remember seeing how they edited it. And I was like, really? You're still taking strips of plastic and cutting them with a razor blade and cutting them back together with Scotch tape. That's how it was done. That's how it had been done for 100 years. So finally, you started to get nonlinear editing, and companies like Avid and others, even Adobe was there with Premiere, an early version of Premiere. Suddenly, those of us who were computer literate could learn this stuff fairly quickly. And I remember I was working at one of the top documentary companies in the world, I would say, but certainly in New York, called Maysles Films. They're founded by the Maysles brothers, kind of legends in documentary filmmaking. Everything was cut on film. And suddenly they asked me to go buy this one computer. And me and some colleagues got the computer, set it up, and there was this alien in the office and nobody knew how to use it. And so I ended up teaching an entire generation of editors in a way, and having to sit with them and comfort them, and guide them, something I enjoy doing because I also teach, but take them through this transition. And there was a lot of fear and a lot of anger and stuff like that. And some optimism too, for sure. With AI, it's kind of come around again. So with documentaries, we've lived through massive revolutions in video cameras getting smaller and smaller. When I started out, you had to carry a gigantic VHS recorder on a belt around your neck as a separate device to the camera. And eventually someone figured out how to put the tape in the camera. Imagine that. And then they got smaller and smaller. The editing became digital and took over. And then HD was probably one of the last kind of massive revolutions, which relatively simple, all things considered, but those of us who lived through it, it was quite complicated. I remember I was just talking to a friend recently. I edited at ABC News for a long time, doing long documentaries. And there was a documentary we did there where it was with National Geographic, and we had to create both a standard definition version and a high definition version of this long 2-hour documentary at the same time. So one was in the 4:3 square ratio and the other was in the 16:9 widescreen ratio. And it was just because people didn't have the right equipment at home to watch the new stuff. So
I would love to talk about how some of the technology has changed access for filmmakers, because we are seeing documentary films that are being made for a lot less money, sometimes shot even on mobile devices. What is the landscape there in terms of accessibility to this creation opportunity?
Yeah, it's interesting because that is sort of a lesser, there's so many colorful things always happening that I think the arrival of the cell phone camera and when the cell phone camera switched to HD, I remember being Elmo. In fact, when I made that was 2000. We made it in about 2010, released it in 2011. And I remember just in the waning days of that project, near the end of that, we still needed some shots of like the sun glinting off a railroad track, like the view from a passenger seat of a train. All right. So I happened to be going home to Maryland, and the day the iPhone 4 came out, and that was the first one to have HD video. And so I bought that, shot some footage out the window, and thought, I'll put that in the film temporarily. And then our professional, online editor who was going to look at it later would tell me I have to replace it. And then I decided not to mention to him that this was shot on a phone, and no one ever noticed. And it looked great. And in fact, it still remains some of the best footage in the film. So the fact that everyone has not only a camera in their phone, but like a beautiful device, if you turn it sideways. Other than that, even shooting vertically is a whole new format. So that is interesting. I would say for documentaries, yes, there is the ability to record life. You have more ability to record life than we've ever had before. Also, interestingly, I would say it's not just the equipment that you use for recording or for editing as well, but just the availability that where you can upload your video. I mean, I think YouTube is one, and it's not that people don't know about YouTube, but in some ways I often feel like it's unrecognized for how unbelievably fantastic it is. It completely changed our world. And I watch documentaries. I essentially watch documentary type programs on YouTube more than I watch so-called regular television,
I don't think you're alone in that, maybe beyond documentaries. Certainly we find ourselves, Chris and I, sitting down in the evening and watching podcast productions, podcasters who are creating these long interview style podcasts that they upload to YouTube and, sitting there for 30, 60 minutes. It kind of makes me chuckle a little bit because we were doing video podcasts many, many years ago, but so much has happened in terms of stylistically. Like, I think people are much more aware of good audio, good video, and like you said, the ease of being able to upload those larger files. So a lot has happened even in the podcast space. I mean, you're an avid podcast listener and host. So what do you think about content creators right now in 2025? There is some pretty incredible content out there.
Yes. And just one note about the quality. I remember, obviously in the beginning, YouTube, the things that people made on YouTube did not have high quality, right? And did not have high video, high production value. You were doing like television level stuff. A few other people were, and Marcus Brownlee in particular started doing like really gorgeous HD quality stuff. And now it has ramped up, and the equipment has made it easier to do that as well. But I think it's interesting. Podcasting and YouTube has remained separate. in an interesting way, right? I mean, I think they both exist, and both you like, I know you make video clips available on YouTube, and then you have the separate podcast, right?
Yes.
And I actually do an audio podcast called What the If, a science podcast every week, and I have chosen to only do audio because I loved radio, and I like the fact that what we do is sort of imaginative thought experiments, and I like the idea that you have to kind of create the images in your mind as you listen to the scientists imagine some scenario, you know. So I think there's definitely a place for both, but essentially the just total overwhelming availability of any kind of media you want, you know, is incredible.
Yeah, it definitely is. And now with the introduction of artificial intelligence, like you alluded to at the beginning of the conversation, now not only is it easier for people to get access, I think, to hardware to be able to actually create high quality content, but also AI is playing a unique role as well to improve content, to scale content production. So let's talk about the role of artificial intelligence when it comes to video creation. Where are we at right now, and is this a good thing?
Well, if is it a good thing is interesting because it may be among the first time that we really had to, that there was some nuance to that question, right? In the past, you know, is it a good thing that we went to HD? Sure, it's fine. You know, it's not a problem. Was it a good thing that we had digital editing or digital things like that? Yeah, it was fine. I mean, it was a bit of a pain to have to learn that stuff, but nonetheless, for the first time, because it can replace, it seems to replace jobs in some ways. You can imagine the fact that if I can create video, for instance, here's the plus and minus of it. I teach classes, teach AI for documentary filmmaking. And one of the things I demonstrate is how, imagine you were making a documentary about the building of the pyramids in Egypt. I can go to Sora or any of the video websites, video AI sites, and type in, you know, I can just describe people on the halfway up a pyramid that they're constructing, you know, raising gigantic stones with ropes or whatever. And I get something that looks just like, maybe perhaps too much like, a Discovery Channel, you know, reenactment, right? So now maybe those things aren't actually filmed in Egypt. They're probably filmed in California, but a crew, you know, actors, massive props, all kinds of stuff like that, I now achieve by simply typing a few words, right? So that's tremendously enabling for us, let's say low budget indie filmmakers, but also it could have a major effect on all the people who are employed making reenactments, for instance. So that's definitely going to be a shakeup. But again, I've always approached things, you know, everything I've done is I've always been curious, how much can I do by myself or with a very small team? I just enjoy that. I've worked at big companies, of course, but what we can do is on a small budget with a small team is truly unbelievable. However, I think partly implicit in your question too is what's the quality of the video? And I literally think this week may be the first time I've seen things that are just crossing over to what I would call broadcast quality video, where it's not distorted, or, you know, you can get a non-distorted output, maybe 1 out of 4, but we're starting to get things now that are truly incredible. Lips, the ability to create lips, you know, fully digital characters that talk and can speak in any voice you want with lip sync. It's just on the edge. We're just on the edge of that, leaving the uncanny valley. So not exactly there, but really, I expect by the fall, we will start to see AI stuff in television documentaries, maybe not in movies yet, but possibly in full feature-length movies too.
Do you think that disclosure matters right now? Like, let's say you're making a documentary film and you are using AI to create a scene that wasn't something that you shot with human actors and a whole crew. Should you disclose you're using it, or is it just a sign of the times that, hey, this is the direction that we're going?
I think you should always disclose it. In some ways, it's actually not a new question in the sense that we have had the ability perhaps through more expensive means, but we've had the ability to do reenactments. We've had the ability. One of the things with digital video, and in the early days, you could get a plugin, a film look plugin, so that, you know, if you let your computer render for 2 hours, you might get 10 seconds that got a grainy look on it, and that looked like a film. So you might be able to slip that into a documentary as if it was real found footage, maybe an old newsreel you found or something like that. So the documentary world has always had kind of standards where you need to disclose if it looks like, if for some reason there's some question. So typically the way we would do that would be by pushing the style of it. So, you know, you watch a reenactment, maybe they put it in black and white, or maybe it's, you know, if you're creating reenactments with AI, it doesn't have to be photorealistic. It could be comic book style. It could be, you know, stop motion style, or it could just have something about it that indicates this is not the real footage, so that when you, in some ways, it actually comes down to how do you show the real footage? That's the thing maybe you want to highlight, and I think actually can be a value added, we could say, instead of a problem. So yes, I think you shouldn't, it would be bad form to use AI to create things and then try to pass it off as if it was real when it isn't real. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and there's so many ethical questions, but I'm with you. I don't think these ethical questions are necessarily new for those of us who have been using computers in new and creative ways over many decades. I think you start to understand, like, it's always that balance between human and machine and figuring out what's going to make the most sense in terms of that partnership going forward. I would love to talk about the course that you're teaching, because I personally probably live on the side of being a bit of an AI optimist. To your point about allowing really small teams to be able to compete. You know, if you're a small documentary filmmaker, or for us, a small podcast production studio, the fact that we have AI tools that can help us really scale our business is really exciting. So what are some of the things that you teach in this course?
So one of the things I love, again, I feel like is perhaps unappreciated. It's not that you haven't heard of it. So ChatGPT or any of the large language models, I don't want to, you know, pigeonhole or say ChatGPT is the only one. Could be Google, could be Claude, et cetera, Google Gemini. These things are unbelievably powerful. Like the amount of things you can do with them is so much more, you know, than that. So put that aside for 1 second. So with video, you can obviously create video from scratch. You can do all kinds of animation that you wouldn't have done otherwise, not without a big budget. You can create images, so people know that, with Midjourney and things like that. You can create voices or audio books or all kinds of things like that with voice synthesis that's extraordinary. There's even music synthesis. I feel like this is a little bit still coming. But I just think one of the things that's most profound is what you can do with a large language model. So I can use it to anything from I can brainstorm ideas. We walk through the entire process. How can I use a large language model? Well, at the brainstorming phase, absolutely, I can use it. I love to use it in a way like it's like having many mentors, you know, at your disposal. So in other words, if I'm thinking of a film, let's say I got to imagine a scene. I've got to create a scene. I could say, come up with a scene in the style of Steven Spielberg. Come up with a scene in the style of Stanley Kubrick, or, you know, Errol Morris if it's more documentary oriented, or Werner Herzog. And I even will tell ChatGPT, I'm sitting in a writer's room. You be all these people and give me these ideas, and it really helps me think outside the box. It can do things like, a huge part of documentaries is taking transcripts of interviews. So we interview people often for hours at a time, right? And I know you do that too. And you can get instant transcripts that are actually very good now. It used to be, you still needed humans to do it. Now, this is another area where I must say the robots do it instantaneously, and they do it quite well. Then you can ask the large language model, find me the most emotional moments of this interview. Now, I'm still going to watch it. I'm still going to go through it. But if I was under a serious time crunch, I could use this as a quick way to identify those. If it's not a time crunch, I just enjoy, because it takes no time at all for it to do that, to pull sound bites for me, just text. Then it's like a second eye, you know, I've got with me, which is really fantastic. And again, I can ask it, think in terms of this, think in terms of that. I use it for outlining. I use it for coming up with shot lists, basically any kind of creative act, anything you have to think through. And then lastly, I'll just say that even outside of work, I actually, and this is going to sound, I don't know, a little bit woo, but I use it for help with decision making. And I'm not using it to give me the advice necessarily, but just simply help me think through. There might be some business decision I need to make, or somebody made an offer to me, and it's like, okay, well, what should be the split between us on this project? Should I get 50? Should it be 50-50? Whatever. I can actually say, hey, what are the industry standards for this kind of arrangement? What are the pluses? What are the minuses? And you can just talk through it in that way. You would never. When did we ever have anything like that? It's almost as if the internet can talk back now.
Yeah.
It's not just a one way you go search things.
I do want to talk about what you're working on now beyond teaching and hosting a podcast, because I know you're working on a new documentary. And I have to say, as techie as I am, my big blind spot is video games. I have never immersed myself in that world. And so I would love you to walk me through what you're working on today. And I think I've seen it on your website, talking about why this video game is so important, and share with us that documentary and how things are going.
Yeah, so it's a long, slow process. So, but as it is in the independent documentary world. But yeah, I did a Kickstarter a few years ago, and for this documentary, it's the current title is a working title is "A World I Want to Live In," and it's about the video game Myst, MYST. And it's called A World I Want to Live In for a number of reasons. But one of them is that one of the creators of the game, it was created by two brothers and a very talented team of people that worked with them, Rand and Robin Miller, when they were living in, essentially Rand was living in a mobile home in the woods of Spokane, Washington, when they created this game started in 1991. They released it in 1993. No one had ever heard of them. They made this little thing, using HyperCard and stuff, and on a Mac. And it blew up and became the most popular game in the world, and remained the most popular game in the world for the next 9 years. It is now in the Museum of Modern Art as one of the great examples of American art and design. Those who played it, as soon as I mentioned the game, those people are smiling right now, remembering it. If I were to play you even just a bar or two of the music from the game that was written by the younger brother, Robin, it would take you right back to that game. And it's interesting you say you aren't really a gamer. I mean, I'm not either, but I loved it when it came out. And my sister, who didn't play games at all, remembers it being the one game that a lot of people remember it as the one game they played. It became this thing that multiple generations have played. Many parents had little kids at the time it came out and played the game. It was a very relaxing puzzle adventure game, right? So different from first-person shooters or anything like that. It had no score. It had no clock. You just played at your own pace. And essentially, you had to find clues in this world. And when you solved some of the puzzles, a door would open, and suddenly an entire new part of the world would open up. Ages, they called them. And but it became this thing where parents could play with the kids. The kids grew to love it. The game is still popular to this day. I think a couple of years ago, they did a reissue of it, and it won Game of the Year on the Apple App Store. They recently re-released also a new, not just remastered, but a completely re-envisioned and expanded version of the sequel to the game, Riven, which was also extremely popular. Long story short, the documentary, tells the story of the brothers, and I always felt like, I grew up at that time, as you did too. And in some ways, I always wanted to make a documentary that tells the story of the personal computer revolution and how those of us who are creative, how much it totally changed our lives. It basically gave us the life that we have now. And I have a tremendous affection for it, and it was a tremendous amount of fun. And these guys happen to have had a front row seat for that, that fusion of, I think it was Steve Jobs said, that intersection of technology and art, right? So the company is, by the way, Cyan, is still around today. It is Wired called it the longest running independent game company in the world, Cyan, still in Spokane. Still doing it. So yeah, it's pretty exciting. People can find out more about it at themistdocumentary.com.
Well, I am so excited to watch it, even though, like I said, I am not that I missed out on some of those video game experiences historically, but it's been an area that I have not followed at all, to the point that even when we think about something like The Last of Us, which I love that series, I just watched the recent episode, and no spoilers in case you haven't seen it, but I didn't realize that that very important character was going to die. It was a little traumatic, whereas my 16-year-old is like, yeah, they're just following the game, Mom, like get with it. So it's hurt me tremendously in my social life that I haven't paid enough attention. You know, it's interesting. You said something there that brought me back again to a time many decades ago when you talked about the personal computer and the impact that it would have on our lives as creative individuals. I want to ask you just one last question, because I remember for me the exact moment I was in journalism school in Halifax, and I was researching an article about the internet, and there was this couple in Maine, and they wrote, they were selling horses online. They had started an e-commerce business. This was like in 1999, so it was pretty incredible at the time. And I found it just amazing that this tiny little farm in Maine, because of the internet, was able to buy and sell horses. And I named the article I wrote about them "Horse Hunting in Cyberspace." And I will never forget it, because for me, as someone who grew up in a rural area in Prince Edward Island and didn't have, parents who were going to give them a whole bunch of money to go and live their lives, I had this aha moment, which is why I moved to San Francisco, because I thought, this is incredible. Like, maybe I have a chance of competing, in business at a level as a creator or journalist because of this technology. It's kind of equalizing the playing field for a lot of people. What do you think that moment was in your life when you saw that technology was going to be something that you would not sort of shy away from, but instead embrace?
I think I don't know why, but I embraced it immediately. So I remember being able to, you could actually get some cartridge for the Atari 2600 that allowed you to program BASIC on it, I think, and there were like keypads or something like that. But interestingly, I can actually mention something that's very recent. So sort of like yet again, this notion, this example of like, wow, this is really something new and incredible. So a very good friend of mine, Anne Fizard, she's from Newfoundland, and I was told that's the proper way to pronounce it, by the way. Is a cartoonist. Her cartoons have been in the New Yorker and things like that. And anyway, she was asked by a filmmaker to create an animated sequence of some horses, just like you were talking about. And so she was ready to spend the entire weekend, drawing these horses in every single frame. And she'd never done an animation, so she thought, this is going to take a long time. And I said, I think if you just give me the first and last frame, two images, I can go to one of the websites, the AI video websites, give it the first frame, give it the last frame, and it will animate it. And sure enough, it did it. I did it on my phone while I was at the grocery store. And we sent it to the director. He popped it in the film. He's like, this is great. Done.
Wow.
So yeah, it's astounding.
It is astounding. I mean, what an incredible journey this has been. Well, I just wanted to thank you for spending so much time with me for the show. I know we've kept in touch over the years, and it's been really fun to watch your journey and see how you're using technology. I'm really excited for what you have stored in the future. Finally, just want to ask you, for people who want to follow you, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, they can go to my website is philipshane.com. It's Philip with one L, Shane. And my classes, if you're interested in those, are at desktop-documentaries.com.
Thanks, Philip and Amber. Up next, we chat about the best health and wellness tech for your mom this Mother's Day.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.
Before we get to some of the most innovative tech for the mom on your list, Amber spoke to Sarah Agvami, Director of Inclusion and Belonging at Best Buy Canada, about the importance of accessible tech for everyone in your family and beyond.
In today's world, people of all ages and all skill levels really do rely on technology. As we approach Mother's Day, I'm really excited to share some of the most innovative health tech. Can you talk a little bit about how tech has evolved for women, especially when it comes to health and wellness?
Absolutely. I mean, tech is today's love language, if you ask me. Where it comes to caring for others, it really comes about, two, three things, and especially in case of mothers and women specifically, we're looking for function a lot of times. And what function does, it gives back time, it gives freedom. It comes in different ways, giving back, freedom in order for you to look after your health or do what you need to in terms of looking after your wellness. So I said, I always say as step number one, give me time back because I know what to do most of the times. I just don't have the time for it. And second part is just offering the best. And, where it boils down to is quality of sleep, quality the way I look or self reflection back to myself, into my life, into my loved ones are some of the features that we're seeing are being really looked into, whether it's in form of fitness or if it's form of quality of sleep or skincare. Tech is definitely bringing it.
We have spoken in the past about tech and aging, and this is an area that I am really excited about. When you look at the Canadian population, how do you think that tech can help people age in place?
Aging in place ultimately comes from the chance of me as a person living as independently as I wish. So bringing independence into my life is the most important thing and role technology can play without necessarily replacing the human touch. And this comes in different elements. The most interesting thing we've seen in industry right now is environmental factors when it comes to a home that looks after me as I choose to age in the home I work really hard to build and pay for over time. So, independent living is what tech can support in so many different ways, which I'm happy to expand on, starting with safety and security of the home.
Absolutely. And I think another thing, as we mentioned, we were talking a little bit about is health and wellness. And I think we see some of
Mhm.
this tech for that aging population as well to monitor their health.
Absolutely. Knowing my vitals and my digits enables early intervention. So if there's anything that's up and about my body, I'm the first one who knows something's off with me. So using technology to understand a little bit about myself. So my doctor appointments are well informed. I have a journal and data I can talk about. Just makes that much, the quality of that conversation much more better. All the way through what needs to be done next. So let's say if one has had a change in health, understanding how the digits can be improved is where tech also plays a huge role. And of course, we cannot forget about the mental health aspect of, every phase of our life. Everybody forgets about, the F word being fun. So a lot of times technology gets, brought into the conversation when it comes to our mental health balance and how can we, keep going and thriving while keeping, life in a positive tone.
I was reading your LinkedIn post, and I saw a post that you shared recently that said each step we take toward inclusion, whether it's in our workplace, schools, or communities, helps create a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. I wanted to ask you a little bit more about this comment that you made, especially as it pertains to people living with disabilities.
100%. And I think every single thing, at least that's the oath I took to myself, is when we introduce programs, let's make sure we never leave anyone behind. And the pandemic, the world that went through COVID, we had to do a lot of things, moving a lot of services to a digital space. Technology came into play, but that notion, that change, that evolution did unfortunately leave a lot of folks behind. So it's now kind of looking back and say what services have moved to a digital space, what technology has moved into a phase where maybe some of the marginalized groups can no longer take part in whether it's online banking, whether it is booking my own appointments with a doctor or simple things throughout the day that needs a revisit. Inclusive design is a concept that can always be used for things we're putting out in the world, and every single one of us do it on a regular basis. So providing access in every step, whether you're an innovator or whether you're experienced designer or whatever case may be, is the most important thing we can keep in mind learning from the pandemic.
In a couple of minutes on the show, I'm going to share some of my top picks for Mother's Day. So I would love to get your insight in terms of how should people shop for tech for Mother's Day, whether it's for their mom or maybe it's a mom figure in their lives.
Um, I mean, this Mother's Day, the best gift might not be flowers, although I always encourage it, but it might be function and self-care. So allowing mom to focus on herself. So, and could be moms or mom figures, so folks who spend a lot of time caregiving throughout their day. So imagine giving a device, to a person that improves their sleeps, relieves pain, or helps them connect with their, grandchildren or loved ones in the family through a proper seamless call. So that is modern love. That is the way to give back, and that is exactly what we're seeing in 2025 this year.
Mother's Day is just around the corner, so it's a good time to start shopping for that something special for mom. Here are some of the most innovative and relaxing health and wellness tech picks for mom from Best Buy, where you can use quick and easy store pickup so you can get your purchases in as little as an hour after ordering online. First, the Therabody Smart Goggles help to reduce eye strain and headaches. The Smart Sense technology powers Smart Relax mode to offer personalized vibrations to lower your heart rate. Second, Garmin's Vivo Active Bluetooth smartwatch is the perfect way for mom to track her health and wellness. It comes in 4 really great colors, and the battery life lasts for up to 11 days. Third, the Hatch Restore 2 Smart Light Clock helps you manage your sleep routine with a phone-free nighttime routine. This clock is an all-in-one sleep solution that includes a reading light, a meditation light, and a sunrise alarm clock. And finally, fourth, the Homedics Therapist Percussive Massager device is a portable massager that can target your tight muscles with 3 levels of intensity. Thanks to the one-touch operation, it is super easy to control. If your mom needs any tech assistance, remember that Best Buy Blue Shirts are in store to answer questions, and Geek Squad agents are always ready to help anyone set up their favorite tech. You can get all of the links and prices over on my blog at ambermac.com, and thanks again to Best Buy Canada for supporting our Mother's Day Health and Wellness Tech Tour.
Thanks so much to Best Buy for supporting these segments on the Amber Mac Show. As always, please let us know online about what tech you'd like us to discuss on the show, and keep us posted on some great guests you'd like to see us interview.
And coming up in the next episode, we talk post-election news with David Moskrop, one of my favorite Canadians to follow online, and we have lots more coming up. See you soon, and thanks for listening.
You're listening to The Amber Mac Show on Canada Talks, Sirius XM 167.